Hey there, kiddos, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank. I hope that you are having a great day. And in today's video, I'm going to be sitting back in my very squeaky chair, relaxing and having a little conversation with all of you guys where we take a trip down memory lane back to the 90s to discuss a collectible that once upon a time seemed to have the entire world in its grip. Everybody wanted it. Everybody wanted to buy and sell and trade and collect as many of these bastards as possible. It didn't matter what version or design it was. People always wanted more. It was a global sensation. It was making headlines in the news, and it was worth quite a lot of money. So much money, in fact, that if you had a big enough pile of these sitting away in storage somewhere, you were practically guaranteed to pay off a house someday. That's what everyone was saying. And then all of a sudden, this collectible disappeared. That's right. Today, we're talking about Pogs. Bet you thought we were going to be discussing Beanie Babies today, didn't you? No, I put a switcheroo on you. We're talking about this little cardboard disc game, Pogs, the collectible from yesteryear that, like I said, once upon a time had quite the grip on especially kids, especially younger kids. They were all over these things. So, for those of you who don't know, Pogs is a collectible game, very much like TCGs. In fact, it was very popular around the same time Magic the Gathering was first getting its footing. So Pogs are these little cardboard discs that you play by taking a bunch of these little guys, putting them face down on a stack, and taking another kind of Pog called a slammer, and guess what? You slammed it onto the ground near the stack, trying to knock as many of them off and flip them over as possible. Any that land face up, you're free to take home with you once the game is over. And yeah, that's it. Now, Pogs did not start off as this crazy collectible that was kind of play for keeps disc game. In fact, if I recall correctly, and I might not because my memory's not great, I believe this started off as a kind of just small game that kids in Hawaii played with discarded milk caps, just as a way to pass the time after school and such. And it was played for quite a while there with, no collectability to it whatsoever. It was just something kids did for fun. But then in the early 90s, it got popularized as a collectible recognized across the globe. And in, I'm going to say it was 93 or 94, the World Pog Federation, I think it was the name of the company, really went into business, and they started producing loads and loads and loads of these bad boys. These little disc sets that were basically all over the place for a while, as popular as sports cards, more popular than sports cards on the playground, because while you could always trade with your favorite team for sports or whatever to get your favorite players or your favorite team or whatever, it seemed that no matter what the brand was, everything had a Pog. And as a result, kids who are, of course, fans of all kinds of different brands, they're going to have their favorite Pogs. Not every kid was into sports cards because not every kid was into sports. Magic the Gathering was still kind of new at the time, so trading card games weren't a big thing, but Pogs had a little bit of everything. They were like the Pops of the 90s, which, if you know anything about Pop figures, you're already worried about where this is going. So yeah, every single brand under the sun, Disney, what are some of the big ones? There was Disney, there were a bunch of Disney ones. There was the Simpsons ones. There was a Power Rangers set that you could get at McDonald's. I think Taco Bell had one for Nintendo 64. Yes, I think it was a Nintendo 64 set. But this, overnight, this went from a small game played in Hawaii to this major collectible that was super popular at recess, especially. Kids would stuff grocery bags full of these little Pogs, especially like the ones that have these nice foil holographic pattern. One doesn't show up in the camera that well, but hang on, let's see if I can find a good one while I talk. Kids would stuff their bags full of like these little foil ones to show off the rare Pogs they have, to both impress their friends. Ooh, this one looks pretty dope. That's a pretty nice foil right there. To both impress their friends and to try and walk away with more Pogs than they entered with. Because, yeah, the collectability was one aspect of the game. You could just go and buy packs of the Pogs to try and get what you wanted, or you could try to win them in the game. And that, of course, had a lot of appeal to the kiddos, because there's nothing quite like taking your Pog collection from someone else's Pog collection. Oh, that's a pretty nice one. Here we go. Another 8-ball foiling. That's a much better foiling looking. It's very shiny. So, like I said, this was a game that people played for keeps, and as a result of it being not just a collectible but also a game, it got really popular. There were all kinds of different packs of the stuff, all kinds of different super collectible sets. Some at the time were worth a surprising amount of money for what these were. Remember, these are just little thin discs of cardboard. Like, there's nothing special about these, but because they were popular and they seemed to be taking over the world, some did have quite a price tag. And they were, of course, desirable. And, of course, there were problems with playing for keeps, especially when you put these in schools. You know, fights would break out on the playground. Kids are accused of cheating. Some kids didn't want to pass up and get rid of the Pogs that they lost, and fights would escalate. And I remember when the schools banned them because, well, it was causing problems. It was disrupting classrooms. It was turning recess into effectively a gambling arena for a bit. There was a solid, like, I don't know, I want to say like 2 to 3 month period where the only thing parents were hearing from schools was, your kid was caught playing Pogs again. That's a no-no. That's gambling. Don't let them do that. You know, but that wasn't the only problem with them. You know, because these were, again, just these little, I need to re-illustrate. Let's find a really ugly looking one. That one doesn't look that good. Hey. Because these are cheap cardboard discs, making knockoffs or making your own Pogs is very easy. In fact, you can make them at home. So knockoffs and bootlegs and competition like Sky Caps, or I think Marvel had Hero Caps for a bit. It was super easy to just make your own. So, of course, a bunch of other companies besides just the WPF got in on the craze and produced their own sets and flooded the market, basically, with their own Pogs. And the WPF themselves, they were losing money hand over fist, not just in lawsuits, but also because it was getting hard to, like, really keep something as flash in the pan as Pogs profitable. So the company was struggling. It was being banned in schools, and while it was really, really hot, especially like 93, 94, 95, or at least I feel like it was still pretty hot around 95, by the time 96, 97, 98 started rolling around, Pogs had largely faded from the spotlight. In fact, Pogs were still being made well into the early 2000s. I think there were even some Pokemon Pogs made. I'll have to check in on that later. You know, they were still being made into the 2000s, especially for like the diehards who still wanted to play and collect and whatever their favorite brands as Pogs. But for the most part, it did fade into obscurity. You know, it was one day at the front page of the news, and then the next day, nobody was talking about it. That's just how crazy it was. It was very much like Neopets, except I don't think there were any big Pog courtroom divorce disagreements where couples had to like put their Pogs in a pile to see who got what. I don't think that happened. So in that respect, Neopets was a bit weirder. But once upon a time, this was one of the biggest collectibles out there. It was one of the most in-demand fads ever. And nowadays, it's just another relic of the 90s, with all attempts, to my knowledge, to get another Pog craze going, just kind of falling by the sideline. Sure, new Pogs, to my understanding, can still be released. New packs are put out all the time. And some, you know, there's plenty of collectability to them. You know, just because 99% of Pogs are super cheap, and do not get me wrong, these are super cheap. The reason I'm making this video is because I bought this binder full of Pogs today. I paid $1 for it. Okay? It was at a flea market. Someone had it for $1, and I was like, screw it. I'll buy that. I'll make a video about it. So you can buy, like, I think there's 60 in here. You can buy 60 Pogs for $1. plus the binder. And that's, of course, for the average Pog. There are still desirable ones, collectible ones. If you manage to get like a full Simpsons set, that's some money. The Power Rangers set from McDonald's is desirable. There's some Michael Jordan Pogs. Michael Jordan was a really big, like he was super popular on Pogs. Everyone had to have at least one Michael Jordan Pog. And I'm sure that some of those are still very collectible even to this day. The Donkey Kong Pog game. There was a big boxed Donkey Kong game where you like slung your Pogs through some cardboard cutouts of Donkey Kong Country. That was a thing. That's pretty, I think that's pretty expensive still. I think it's like $100+ easily. Just because it was such a weird board game, Pog game. I don't know. And like I said, there was other collaborations like the Taco Bell Pogs for Nintendo that had some desirability to it. So it's not like these are all worthless. It's just that the vast majority of them are worthless. And I think that's important to remember because, again, this was a huge collectible that was all over the place for a bit. And then it was gone, with most of it being worthless at the end of the day. Some of it's still very desirable, but most of it not. And I think that matters, especially in retrospective looking backwards, so you can get a bit of an idea of just how frail collectibles are. I very much enjoy talking about Pogs, not because I'm a huge fan of Pogs. You know, I do have some fond memories of them. And there are still Pogs I would like to actually own. I don't think I ever will, but there are some out there that I would like to have. I think it's important to recognize Pogs not just for their impact and for what they were, but also what they signified. The transient nature of collectibles. Because it doesn't matter how popular things are. There can be, just as there's any million number of ways that something can become popular and rise in price and gain global dominance, there's any number of ways that it can fail, too. Pogs were a victim of circumstance and a relic of the time, just like Beanie Babies were, just like certain video games were, and just like all kinds of other collectibles. And if you're at all interested in the world of collectibles, whether it's a very niche corner of the hobby or as someone who wants to get involved with as much of it as possible, I think going back and looking at the past and learning from what worked and what didn't is very important. And Pogs are a good example of something that, for very simple reasons, was destined to obscurity sooner or later. If only because it's too easy to make more, right? It's too easy to make your own Pogs in your closet with a simple Pog maker machine and flood the market with your own custom Pog set. Very easy to do. Anyone could do it. So, at the end of the day, I just wanted to talk about Pogs and bring up a collectible that I don't think most people talk about, but I had an excuse to do it today. So there you guys go. That's my Pog video. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Please like, share, and subscribe to the video. And of course, let me know what you guys want to talk about. And people on the Discord wanted me to knock on a TCG that wasn't Star Wars Unlimited too. So today I will take my extra 20 seconds here at the end of the video to say, man, Battle Cards is an awful card game. You should mock Battle Cards. What a card game. Anyway, that's all I got for you kiddos today. Ciao. Boop.